Hello friends, hello friends. I have got one of those big black wasps thing flying around my office, and I don't know if they sting or not, but they sure do look like they sting. All right. If I suddenly yell, you'll know what happened. Okay, today's Wednesday, but you may or may not be watching it on today. If you're lucky enough and happy enough to catch this live, this is Daily Art Adventure number 618. I can say that word too. Watercolor. What have I been drinking? Tea, Earl Grey. Anyway, watercolor bridal portrait part 2. All right, let's get right to work. All right, so here we are. I don't know that we're going to finish with part 2, so that's why I didn't call it the end. So since last we met, Daily Art Adventure number 617, I basically finished lifting out. So all this light stuff was either lifted out with a brush or with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. Are you familiar with that? Man, that's a tool you've got to know. And I wasn't sure that I was going to take off all the mask right now, but a lot of it was coming off and it was messy, so I decided to finish the job while you watch. There we go. All right. I guess I put mask on her teeth. I didn't remember doing that. It doesn't seem like something I would do, but it sure looks like. How else do you explain that? Those white teeth. All right. So again, if you're new, I have a list here. Dan Nelson's watercolor portrait process, and we're down to number 5. Medium dark. Oh, by the way, just to comment, I know I always interrupt myself, don't I? What is this piece of petrified, it doesn't look very good. It is a rubber cement picker-upper. Also good for picking up a mask. And I just keep a chunk of that there in my drawer. You can use your fingers, but then of course you're rubbing the paper a whole lot more. All right, now this is small brush time. And I'm not going to be aiming for the very darkest of the darks here. Let me see if I'll back up at least part of the time here so you can see my palette as well as the painting that I'm working on. Needs a little more water. All you watercolorists, I think we all do this, do we not? You always have a spray bottle of one size or another, right there at hand, because you're spraying your watercolor tray palette. At least I am, so there we go. And again, I talked earlier about my particular watercolor tray, which is a custom portrait watercolor paints because they're all liftable. Okay, so what color do I want to do here? I'm going to go looking at her face right here. Go with a fairly dark, and I'm trying to decide how red, dark and reddish. There we go. I think that'll work. Here's a good reason always to have a piece of scrap paper in it. Now, this is not quite scrap. I did this yesterday, by the way, in practice, in preparation. Is that the color I want? Nope, I want it redder than that. Let's try this now. Is this the color I want? Yep, but it's too dark now. So let's get that brush wet again. Here we go. A Control Freak's Paradise. So with this layer, I want to begin to do all the darkest parts, eyelashes, eyeball, iris, pupil, and so on. But also, in addition to that, some of the, what I might call number 2 dark areas, that is, areas that are not the darkest, like eyelashes and pupil, but areas that are one step lighter than that. My thinking and my experience is in watercolor, in watercolor, that if you try to, for faces in particular, if you try to jump all the way to full 910 values, 910 blackness, that it has a harsh, cut out, artificial feeling about it. So instead, I'm going to sneak up just a little bit on my darkest darks. By the way, just a minute ago I said ooh when I was doing that eye. If you were with me for the first broadcast of this today, I talked a little bit about this notion of cheating, quote unquote cheating, because I definitely cheated in the drawing of this, the outline of this face. I traced on a light table, I traced, shamelessly traced Harper Ray is her name. I shamelessly traced her face as much as I could, okay? And I was talking about how when you, it's legal to cheat, but your brain shrinks. Of course, I don't mean that literally, of course. I'm using figurative language. Your skills deteriorate. That is true. That is literal. And that causes me no little consternation to think of my skills deteriorating. The solution is then when you have to, you cheat, like I did today doing this. I'm being paid for this job. I do not have time to mess around for hours, trying to get it right. Just do it. Now, what I was going to say, having said all that, however, and this is what all of you artists know, just because I began by tracing on a light table, the outline of this face does not by any means mean that my cares are over. Oh, no, there's there's plenty of opportunity for screwing up still. And that's what elicited from me a minute ago, ooh, because I put a line on her eyes. I put a line down and went, ooh, that's not right. That's going to take some correction. This eye right here appears to me to be too small. And so something's wrong there. Many times your first impression is not the most accurate one, but my impression there is that that eye is too small. So maybe that, maybe something else. I'm barely on camera, aren't I? So again, what I'm trying to do with this layer is medium darks. I'm not going to go all the way to the darkest darks. Save that for another layer so that I don't get too stark, too cartoony of a look. I want to work up to the darkest darks in layers. I can just barely see the pencil lines, the graphite pencil lines that I put. They're almost invisible. I'm glad I didn't do them any lighter. I wouldn't be able to see them at all. And even at that, I'm flying blind much of the time and having to look at the photograph and copy. Old-fashioned, no cheating, in other words. Even when you do cheat, there's still a lot of non-cheating is still necessary. Does that make sense to you? Just because you start out like with some kind of, with a traced outline doesn't mean you don't have a whole lot of drawing left to do. I certainly do have a whole lot of drawing left to do. Drawing the old-fashioned way, that is, without just by looking at the picture and trying to get my lines in the right place. But let me zoom in for just a minute so you can see how this looks. This dark area here needs to be lightened. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll do that. But this is essentially the look that I'm after in layer number 5, medium dark details. Now, a couple things while I think about it, about just the art of doing portrait, the art of doing a full figure, especially a full length figure, especially if it's a bride. I do a lot of brides, as you know, but even if it's not brides, I still do the same thing. I automatically elongate the figure in Photoshop. In other words, this image that I printed off here, I stretched her, not very much. I mean, maybe half an inch. You know, I didn't stretch her head. I did about 1%, unnoticeably. But I stretched this maybe 2%, so half an inch or something like that. And then the other thing that I have done, again, not in Photoshop, the waist right here, I just tucked it in, oh man, 1/8 of an inch, maybe less. My goal is to be complimentary, not cartoony. And by the way, just in case there are any of you who want to lay into me about unrealistic body image, female body shaming and all that stuff, which is a problem, which is an issue. Been there, done that, heard that, does not apply to painters. Applies to the airbrushers who are you know, doing glossy magazine covers. They are the culprits. What I'm doing, because the rules are different. I'm absolutely convinced. If you don't think so, I don't want to hear. Anyway, don't bother coming after me with, you're making all girls feel ashamed of their bodies by making no. Don't want to hear it. Not going to listen to it. Won't even consider. Been there, done that. Thought about it a long time, and decided that doesn't apply to painters. Okay. So far, it looks like her. Okay, that's really the end of, whoops. Yeah, no, all of a sudden I thought, did I get eyebrows? Okay, let's tackle a very particular problem right now. So let me zoom in and show you what's up. So this area, this looks like a bottom lip right here, but it's not. It's actually a bottom lip plus teeth. Do you see her bottom teeth? Harper Ray is her name, lovely young lady, as you can see, and her bottom teeth show above her lip. And somehow I've ended up with, it looks like she's a top teeth only smiler, and that all the rest is lip, and that is not correct. So I have a little challenge ahead of me. How do I get those bottom teeth to show and not look like their lips? All right, so here's how I'm going to try to do that. Again, I'm going to look at my photograph very carefully, and I'm using a pencil again. I'm just going to draw in where I think the top of the bottom lip goes, right about here. I'm doing it with pencil on first on purpose because I'm going to need that line. Now, I've done this before. I don't think I've ever done something quite this small. So we're hoping that it's going to work here. I'm actually going to put down, using that pencil mark that I just put there, I can put down some masking tape, which of course is dangerous. It could tear the paper. Oh, that would be a disaster. One, two, three, 4 pieces of tape indicating the bottom curve of her lip, and then I hope I can do this with just 1 piece of tape. Yeah, indicating the bottom of her top teeth. Okay, so see that little space right there? What am I going to do? Am I going to paint it? Nope. I'm going to take a piece of magic eraser, and I think that's done. Let's see how that looks. Pull this up very carefully. Well, nope, I'm gonna do a little bit more. I saw it get lighter and I thought it might be enough, but I pulled it off. I have to be really careful that none of that magic eraser is hitting any of this beautiful soft area up here. All right, that's as much as I'm going to do of that. That's as much as I dare. I have to wait for a minute for that to dry. And it looks terrible right now, but it'll be fixed in a minute, because the very next thing that comes in after number 5, which was medium dark details, is loose, mid-tone, flesh tones. And when I modified this list, the one I posted this on YouTube community, and I modified the list slightly, and I think I said here, focus especially here on the blush. So I'm doing flesh midtones, but especially the reds. Okay, I'm going to try to do this fairly loosely. No, again, do you all understand that trying to do a watercolor portrait this size is just a little bit south of insane, whatever south means. It's just a little bit crazy to even try to do this. And as you can see, I am trying, speaking of trying, I'm trying to make these strokes somewhat loose. All right, now I've been meaning to talk about this, haven't said anything about it yet. Let's talk about this photograph that I'm copying. Whoops, that wasn't quite dry. I wish I'd waited a little longer there. I'll have to clean that up later. Can you see the photo? Here's the photograph. My client, who is this bride, got permission from her wedding photographer for me to do this. That's quite important, by the way. You cannot copy a professional photographer's, even as a watercolor. Now, if you do it so ridiculously abstract that they can't tell it's theirs, then that's okay. But of course, this is not ridiculously abstract. This is pretty realistic. So this is a photographer's photograph, and that is a significant deal, because listen to this. I don't know if you know this or not, but what a photographer thinks is a beautiful photograph and what a painter thinks is a good photograph or painting are two very different things. This is not. Now, it's a lovely photograph. I am not by saying anything negative about the photograph, but it is a lovely photographer's bridal portrait photograph. It is not ideal for doing a painting from. Why? Just a minute. Let me finish this, and I will show you again. If you missed my broadcast this morning where I started this project, let me repeat some of it. One of the things I often do as an artist, no matter what I'm working on, if I will go to the internet and find samples of work that I like. In this case, watercolor portraits. Watercolor portraiture that I like. Hang on just a second. Let me finish though. I'm trying to be messy. Not sure I'm doing a very good job. All right, let me take just a quick break here and show you, again, for those of you who missed this earlier, before I started this project, I pulled up online, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, about 30 watercolor portraits. I probably looked at 300, but I pulled up 30, very different, not all the same style, but 30 that I really liked. Now, probably the number one characteristic that I would say about watercolor paintings that I like is that they're high key, high contrast, high light. So, for instance, let's zoom in here a little bit. See this guy? Bright shade. Look at bright shade. Bright shadow, intense light, sunlight, shadow, okay? Look at this one. Okay, so it's obvious that the kind of watercolor portraits that I like are these high, here's one that's not. This one's pretty mellow. Let's look on the other side and see if there's any other mellow ones. Yeah, this one is. I like this for different reasons. Look at this. High key, high contrast. Here's another one that's mellow. Very dark. Okay, but the great majority of these, and look at the photograph now I'm working from. Certainly not high key or high contrast. All gentle, soft lighting. Kind of makes you sick, don't it? Okay, so there you go. I cannot do the kind of portrait I really want to do. That's my job. You know, I didn't have to take this job. I could have said, heck no, I'm not going to do that. Or I could have taken the job for money and say, okay, I'll do the best I can. I'll try to make an attractive portrait from a photograph. Because I knew the photograph was going to be like this. I mean, it was, before I even saw it, I knew it was going to be a wedding painted photograph. So that just tells me a lot. Once again, I'm trying to use large strokes. I went to a bigger brush here. And I'm looking, of course, at my reference quite a bit here, even though, as you can tell, I'm trying to treat all of this in a fairly abstract manner. I'm also trying to capture a pretty realistic facsimile of the photograph. Now, that face is, are we zoomed in? I can zoom in even more. That face, it's pretty messy, isn't it? Am I sunk? Is that the end of it? Well, no, I have a few tricks up my sleeve. And that's why this is I'm using my watercolor palette. These are all liftable colors. So before I move on to the next phase, I'm just going to clean up some, not all. I don't want to, I'm trying to avoid I don't want people to look at this portrait and say, oh, the poor artist, he was striving for photographic realism, and he really fell quite far short, right? Instead, I want people to look at the painting and say, ooh, look at, he's a real watercolor painter. And yet look at the within the restrictions of the looseness of the medium, look what surprising degree of realism he was able to achieve. So these little edges, watercolor edges, should we just call them that? You all know what I mean, right? It's where you put down a wash and let it bleed a little bit. Oh, like here's a great big one right here on the chin. And it follows, by the way, just about the right curvature, but it's real hard edge. Now, I don't want to smooth it all out, but I want to smooth it out a little bit. Again, my target, my goal here is not to achieve a photographic realism. That is a very legitimate, and believe me, watercolor is given to photorealism. You can do incredible realism with watercolor, but that's not what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for, I guess, what could be considered really a more traditional watercolor approach, which is a fair high degree of looseness, I guess, to use a non-technical term. Okay, but I've just smoothed out several of my little edges without smoothing all of them out. And I think I'm going to move on to the next step. I'm ready, which is super dark details. That's what I thought. I knew that was coming up next. All right, so back to my, by the way, I was talking earlier about using these cheap brushes. Here's a couple of them. These, oh no, they're not the same. Creative Mark, or it was one of these. Princeton Select, I think it was, yeah. Cheap brushes, yet Rembrandt never had a brush nearly that good. And I was picking on the snobbery. On the other hand, this is a Winsor Newton Series 7. In my opinion, best brush I ever made. And yeah, so there are times. There are times when you want to use the best tool you can lay your hands on, and this is it. This is that time. Okay, I'm dipping my brush in some very wet Liquitex sepia umber and some kind of dark red stuff that I'm not sure what it is, or I would tell you. Okay, so it's a very dark brown. And don't look now, but I'm going to put on 2 pairs of glasses. Is my head completely in your way? No, I guess not. All right, so now I'm really looking at details. This is the time. As many of you know, I do a lot of wedding portraits, and most of those are about this size, and it's usually in oil. And I have learned that it helps to wear a magnifying glass. I don't mean that literally, but I do mean 2.75 magnification reading glasses, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm wearing glasses on top of my glasses. It's a real strong fashion statement. Trust me, just ask my kids. How good looking am I when I'm wearing 2 pairs of glasses at the same time? What about the sparkle in the eye? There are different ways to do that. But probably I'm going to do what I did in my practice dry run through yesterday. I'm probably going to do the sparkle in the eye with a knife way near the end of the painting process. So I'm not going to worry about it too much right now at all. Okay, now the next dark area is the corner, upturned corners of her smile. Frankly, I can think of worse ways to make a living than painting a pretty girl's face all afternoon. I can't think of many better ways to make a living. Yeah, okay, yeah, handsome guy, that'd be fun. That'd be fun too. Or an ugly person. I'm an equal opportunity portrait painter. Bring me your homely, I'll do anything for money. No, I mean, I'll do any portrait for money. You don't have to be good looking. You know, it's funny, speaking of that, I've mentioned this before in previous broadcasts. The fact is, there's something magical, at least for me, when I'm doing portraits. The longer I stare at a person's face, the more I see, tap into, experience, feel the beauty of that person's face. And that is absolutely true. There's never been an exception to that. Now let me take my 2 pairs of glasses off then. Okay, I'm within shouting distance. It's got some work. I've got it. It needs some work. I'm trying to say. But we'll just proceed here. So some blue in her eyes. Now back to the, are there any other parts of her face that have dark? Yeah, and there are. I need to get her red lips much redder before she really starts looking like herself. So. The reflection, the highlights on her shiny bottom lip, I am ignoring that completely right now. I will trace that out. I will scratch that out with an X-Acto knife. And that will need to be a little bit later in the process, unless I find, as sometimes happens, unless you find that the lack of it is bothering you, then sometimes you have to jump ahead and do something, even though you'd rather save it for later. All right, there's just a little crease under her arm here. Yeah, it's just about the right color for the shadows between her fingers down here. Am I on camera? Yep. Okay. Hey, Uncle 57. You're not Uncle 60 yet. Okay. Got to change that. Hey, Horatio. Is that okay to say your name? My wife and I are going out for dinner tonight. Thank you very much. Came at a perfect time. Thank you very much. The other art is knowing when to cheat. That is so true. That is good word. Knowing when to cheat. Very, very important. Horatio, do you pour concrete for a living? Plus your aching back. Wow. Oh, I tell you, no, I'm a blessed man. Anytime I think I'm not, I just need to sit back and think a little bit. Uh-oh, I have a problem here. Look at this, I got a mess down here. I'm glad it's way down there. Not sure how that's a bit of green paint. Okay, I'm going to take a break here in a bit. I know in a way how it happened, but I don't know exactly. Yeah, who decided on watercolor for this? My client did. This girl did. I don't know if you heard me say earlier. You probably didn't. But shh, don't tell anybody. She sort of misread my. I hope she doesn't listen to this video. And I'm not complaining, and really, but no, I am not offering to do watercolor portraits at this price level. I would want it to be larger, and so on, and cost more. I'd offered to do in my marketing. I offered to do wedding paintings, quote unquote wedding painting watercolor wedding paintings, and she took that to mean watercolor portraits, which they're not quite the same thing. So here we are. That's, again, I could have stomped my feet, created a ruckus, said, heck no, that's not what that means. Or I could have just bit my lip, which is what I did, and take the money and say, okay, challenge. Which, by the way, the challenge part of that is often the deciding factor. Okay, how am I going to get rid of this? I'm going to try to get this out with Magic Eraser. That looks scary, doesn't it? So now I have a large light area, but that's easy to fix. There. Whew. All right, now do something else. This means I have paint on the back of this. Bear with me for just a minute while we solve this little emergency here. So I'm going to put clean paper on the back of this, covering up all the paint that created a mess. Forgive me, this is real life, isn't it? So I was saying, I don't normally do portraits in watercolor at this size for this price range. They would be both larger and more expensive, but my client mistook the word wedding painting for wedding portrait. And again, I could have refused, or I could just say, well, what the heck, I'll just do it. And as I was saying, honestly, the prospect of the challenge, it's like, okay, yeah, that'd be a good challenge. And again, I could think of worse ways to make a living than doing a watercolor portrait of a pretty young lady on a hot summer afternoon in my air-conditioned office. You with me? So I am not complaining. And Harper Ray, if you ever listen to this, no problem, my dear, no problem. But if there's anybody else out there saying, ooh, I want him to do one of those for me, problem. Do you hear that? You hear the difference? All right. So I think I've weathered that little crisis. I've got a slight stain right there, but it's nothing that we can't work around. Now let's see what I've got next here. Yeah, so basically now the list says I'm going back now from tiny little details to medium size color zones, and I believe I'm going to go this time, I think I'm going to do it with a flat brush instead of, I've been using a round for a while. That went on a whole lot more intense than I expected, so let me add some water to that brush. I am going to be doing some lifting. But generally speaking, I'm liking the way this face and the way the flesh tones are working. Yeah, I'm generally pleased both with the flesh tones that I'm seeing now and with the texture, the roughness of the watercolor. Now, I don't know, I'm looking at my list. One of the things that I've spelled out in my list here is look for alternate flesh tones. So I'm staring at the photograph, which again is right up here. That's what I'm looking at a lot. And I'm saying, man, are there any even hints? And that's, again, one of the downsides, if you will, of working from a professional photographer's photograph, is that this kind of thing is almost what the professional is trying to get out of her photographs. It's a slight overstatement, but she's not I'm saying she, whatever. The photographer is not into these non-flesh tone flesh tones. In other words, right now I'm putting green and blue in this girl's face. Why? Because I want it to look more like a watercolor painting and less like a photograph. I'm using artistic license, but really I'm looking at the photograph for any place that has even where it's there's no blue, but where it's less red, perhaps we should say, than other areas. And also same thing with yellow. I can do just a little bit of yellow. Yeah, right here. Yeah, right here. I'm still being quite cautious. I don't know if you can tell that or not. I'm putting stuff down and then going, eeks, that's too much. When really, if I were painting this for myself, I'd be aiming for stuff like this. I would actually be leaving a lot more of this off color, secondary color, alternate flesh tones. I've called it in my outline. Alternate flesh tones that aren't flesh tones, which have been green, blue, and yellow. Yellow is a flesh tone, but and again, I hope I'm not just ruining it. I hope I'm not screwing up. I hope I don't live to regret this. I say all that thinking, I won't. It's the kind of thing that I didn't have the nerve to do when I was a young man. There's some truth there. Back in the days when I was more stuck on similitude, realism. All right, that looks quite nice. The main thing I want to do, and I think, well, I need to dry this, so we're going to take a quick break because, again, here's my hair dryer. Oh, and my breaker switch has broken on my hair dryer. There we go. So I'll let you hear this for just a second. I'm going to take a quick break and be back in just a minute. Okay? See you in a minute. Bye. All right, that didn't take long. I'm back, and even though this is not on my process list, I've got myself in a place here. I'm generally happy with the way things are going, but with the last two layers, I got a painting that was considerably too dark. So it's time for lifting, and here is where. Here's where I hope that all my research is correct, and I'm hoping that all the colors on this face are in fact liftable. So I've got a damp, wet brush here, rubbing, 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 and it's a soft brush at the moment, and then blotting it with a tissue. So far, so good. It's not coming out quite as much as I would like there. Let's try it over here, see if we have any more luck. Not bad. Zoom in so again so you can see. Right? It looks like a girl's face, doesn't it? I'm being a little facetious here. Of course it looks like a girl's face. We're well within the range of humanoid here. It's not what I'm aiming for. I am aiming for better than that, and of course for a likeness. I think I might go ahead before I end this broadcast, and do some scratching with a knife so that you guys can see see some of that magic happen. Now, if you've ever seen me do, if you've ever seen me do one of my watercolor sketch broadcasts, you can find those just by doing a search for watercolor sketch. And it's quite obvious, I expect. What I'm doing now is not watercolor sketch. This whole portrait is either going to be legitimate, legal Watercolor Society of America watercolor, or fake. In other words, if I do need to cheat, which I'm not above doing, what does cheating mean? Well, cheating is using any opaque medium, gouache, whiteout. Okay, if I do use any of that, then I'm no longer, quote unquote, legal for American Watercolor Society. And I'll do that only as a last resort. I do want to try to do it legally. All right, I'm going to take a break from lifting. I'm not entirely happy with how that is not lifting as much as I would like. Let's take a break here, though, and let's do some scratching. Again, so I'm looking at this face a lot, this photograph, right? And working on this. And this is a good time for 2 pairs of glasses again. Oops, and I keep moving it, so I need to back out just a little bit. First of all, the most obvious highlight is right here. Just start out gently. And again, I'm working on arches or arche, hot press watercolor paper. Scratching like this is, I think, easier on traditional 300-pound cold press. And that 300-pound cold press is, you know, it's as stiff as a piece of cardboard and thick and able to withstand a much higher degree of abuse than this is. I'm actually erasing, quote unquote. I'm actually taking some of that red paint that bled up into her bottom teeth. Removing that, diminishing this line between her teeth, here and here too. All right, now let's go up to her eye. There's very little highlight in the photograph, but I believe I can get away with a little bit more than the photograph. Just a little bit. Don't overdo it. Don't get into, you know, big Disney-fied doughy-eyed reflection in the eyes. We don't need to overdo it. Now this is not a highlight. I'm just scratching to create a lighter area right underneath her eye. And same thing underneath his eyebrow. Now, the danger of scratching like this is once I've scratched the paper like this, everywhere where I've scratched, the paper will no longer behave appropriately like watercolor paper. Does that make sense? It's sitting here now. All the places where I've scratched are rough, of course. So they're just sitting there waiting to blot up. What's the word I'm looking for? Soak up any watercolor paint and create really a big dark splotch. So it's usually best to save all this scratching till you're quite sure that you're not wanting to do any more painting in this area. And I think that's the case. I'm being a little bit risky here because I'm doing some scratching a little bit early in the process. Now, let me take off my super duper glasses and let you guys see both at the same time. Yeah, I'd say that looks like Harper Ray, wouldn't you? Now, a couple tricks. Piece of Scotch tape. Not getting carried away, but just lifting up some of the lint, so to speak, that I just created with the scratching. Okay? That's fix number one. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do this or not. I don't want to show it. I want to demonstrate it for you. I have here an electric eraser. Just a little battery-operated thing. And the batteries are... In fact, hang on just a second. Bear with me just for a minute. Eyebrows look a little too rounded. I think you're probably right. Thanks for that tip. Hang on just a second. I have some batteries over here. I'm going to put new batteries in my... Using erasers on watercolor is an old time-honored tradition. Using an electric eraser, of course, is just a newfangled time-honored tradition. So again, bear with me for just a minute. These electric erasers, I used to look at them in the art store and say, who in the heck would ever need an electric eraser? About 30 years ago, I bought one and said, oh, that's who would buy an electric eraser. They're a really good tool. Again, forgive me for all this wasting of your time while I change batteries. Right, let's see if that's any better. Oh, much better, much better. Okay, here's my, again, piece of scrap paper, just to make sure that the eraser's not dirty and doesn't have any old pencil on it, right? That would be, do you know what I mean? Old graphite that would come off on my new paper. That would not be happy. There we go. So my eraser is clean. Now, I don't know if I can do any erasing on here now, but I'm going to try just for fun. Oh, I can. Yeah, it's coming off a little bit. So there you go. So I'm still, I'm still in the Watercolor Society of America Good Boy Club. In fact, nobody could, no, you wouldn't be able to tell that I used an eraser. I just mostly did that just to, oh, let me show you a little, another little tool. This brush, this is just a dust removing brush. That's all it's for. And I was using this eraser earlier, again, just to clean up any loose crumbs that might have been left from any of those operations. All right, somebody says eyebrows too rounded. Well, maybe. One thing is, happily, the eyebrows are not dark enough. So I say happily, I'm sorry, I've got a brush between my teeth. That's good news, so to speak, because in watercolor, making something slightly darker, it's like, that's what watercolor is all about, right? So it's like such an easy fix, like, woohoo, we can fix that. All right, so just a little bit of medium brown paint. Let me look at the photograph. It's not the top of the eyebrow, it's the bottom one right here that can come down a little bit more. How about the other one? That's pretty close. That one's darn close. Yep. Okay, but let's do this. And I'm not paying any attention at the moment to my list, but this all goes under just get the job done, would you? So now I'm looking at little details, little creases. Yeah. Easy stuff, fun stuff. A little more dark under her nose. A little more dark in her nostril. Again, anytime you have to make something darker as a watercolor paint, you just go, oh, whew, okay, good, that's easy. it's when you find yourself needing to make something lighter that you start scratching your head and say, okay, how are we going to do this? And I just showed you 3 different methods for doing that. One is lifting with water, one is scratching with a knife, and others erasing with an eraser. What if you really get in trouble and none of those are quite doing the job? Do you have any other recourse? Yes, well, yes, but you get kicked out of, again, get kicked out of the good boy club, but you can do it. And when you're doing a job for a client, that's what matters. It's unlikely that they are experts in water. They won't be able to catch you. But yes, here's the answer. If none of those things work, then yes, you can mix up real gentle mixes of opaque watercolor or gouache. Does that make sense? So you can apply, and I don't know the rules. I mean, no, I know the rules. I bet in all the years that, American Watercolor Society, for instance, have been having their national shows, I would guess that there were several times, maybe many times, that somebody has cheated and snuck in and got away with it. It's very possible that they tried to cheat and got caught. They don't get shot or kicked out. I think you just get eliminated from the competition. Well, I mean, cheating by using some kind of opaque medium on the sly. I bet it's happened. I just bet it's happened because I know human nature, and plus I think if you're really, really, really careful, I think you can get away with it very often. Okay, now I'm going to do something, whoops, a little more radical. I should have tested that on a piece of paper, shouldn't I? On my There we go. I would really like a little edge of light right here, sliver along the edge of her neck. Yeah. Are you seeing me? Yeah, there we go. So I'm using, this is an old brush, bristle brush that I've been using for lifting. Bristle brush gives you a little bit of friction, so it helps with lifting. And then I broke it and then stuck the other end in a pencil sharpener so that it gives me a wooden point, which again acts like a little brush. I'm roughing up the paper pretty vigorously right now, but it's in a very small area to see if I can get, yes! Can you see that? I think you can. See that little, I'm going to use this end of the brush just to clean up. See that little line right there that I just made right there and right there? That encourages me to do more. Just give the guy an inch, he'll take a mile. Okay, so my newly created little wooden scraper. By the way, plastic that is a plastic point would not have the same effect. And the fact that it's wood does indeed make a difference. And again, just as when I was scratching with a knife, what I'm doing right now is roughing up the paper. I'm really ruining the paper, if you will. If I tried to do another wash on top of any of these areas, it would not go well. So it's clear that whether I want to be done on the face or not, I am finished. I cannot do any more washes on the face. Does that make sense? And that's okay because the face is shaping up, I think, just fine. I'll look at it with fresh eyes tomorrow, of course, and fresh eyes always, see things differently. I'm happy with the likeness. I think you can see, let me back up a little bit so you can see both better. You can clearly see the difference in color. This is all red, flesh tone. This has a myriad of other colors in it, and I've already told you I'm doing that because I'm trying to actually steer away from the look that I was going, that I didn't want people to think, oh, he's trying to be photorealistic. And there's a little bit of roughness down here. I'm trying to decide whether I want to keep all of that. I just decided just now I do want to make a light mark on the side of her cheek right here. Push, lift. Now let's go to some more traditional lifting. So this is nothing radical or crazy here. I'm just using the bristle brush. Want a little more highlight on this arm. You really can't tell how much is coming out until you blot it with a tissue. And that tells you, yeah. Okay, from a distance, I'm quite happy with that, with this face. Let's leave it for a while. Let me show you a few other tricks. Hey, Uncle 57. Bless your heart. My first, what's it called? Super chat. Uncle 57. Bless your heart. Coffee money. You are too kind. I will tell my wife, and we will indeed have coffee. Thank you so much. My first super chat, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Horatio, for the email, the YouTube video you sent me. I looked at it and then discovered it was out of date. So I had to look a little bit longer to find out how to set up super chat because they keep changing it. But anyway, I got the job done, and thank you so much. You're very kind and generous. I appreciate that. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Uncle 57 showing you how to use super chat. That is wonderful. I appreciate it immensely. Okay, so what you saw me doing here was lifting out again on her dress this time. I'm trying to decide what to do next. All right, I know. Here's another trick. More tricks, more tricks. Here's a spackling blade. I want the edge of her dress. It comes down along in front of her arm. Boom. Beautiful. Perfect. So I get a nice, sharp, but not too sharp edge right there. I bet I want to do that some other places, don't I? You bet. Right here. Oh, wait. Though now this is going to get a little more complicated because I can't be erasing, lifting into her arm. So I'm going to put a piece of masking tape there. Hold this down as a mask, handheld mask, and then rubbing with the Mr. Clean, and then quickly dab up any, the little water gets under that edge, so you want to dab that up really quickly. I'm happy with this. I'm beginning to chortle, aren't I? Not just Uncle 57's $5 coffee money. My first super chat, but I'm happy with my painting. Okay, now I have an area where I need to do more of this tricky lifting out inside her arm. See the photograph? See right there, inside her arm is quite bright white, and I've got it, with all my shenanigans, I've gotten it quite dark while I was painting her arm with broad strokes. I don't apologize for that. It had to be done. It was good to get it done. There we go. Shouldn't be too hard to fix. It took me a while to figure out how to use the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, by the way. It really does function very much like an eraser. In other words, you have to rub it, and it dissolves into little crumbs like an eraser. You can't just, I'm not going to do it here because it'll mess up. You can't just wipe it. It doesn't make stuff disappear just in contact. It's a combination of the rubbing and the chemical in it, whatever it is. Okay, and I see an area for just a little bit of lifting out. You don't. Here, some of you are already thinking funny things. Wait a minute, is he rubbing her breast? I am with a brush. You know, I run into this, of course, a lot when I'm doing bridal portraits. This woman, this is her day. She's supposed to be more beautiful on this day than any other day of her life. And we've talked about this a little bit before. That I'm going to use Jordan Peterson language again when he talks about the Bible. What is the language he uses? He calls it RK. It's my language, not his. Mythology, is that the word he uses? Anyway, the idea is not that in the academic sense of the word, mythology doesn't mean darn not true. What it means is universal realities told in story form. And we've talked about this before. I believe that the Genesis account of the creation, if you go, and here I'm getting too deep for some of you, but if you go to the book of Genesis, looking, asking, begging for a definitive scientific account of what took place, I think you get yourself in a whole bunch of trouble. That's not how the original readers read it. But if you go to it looking for mythical, again, I'm not getting the right word, realities, there's all kinds. Okay, so here's one, for instance, this is one of my favorites, that according to the story, God created Adam, right? And Adam was by himself for a while, long enough to name all the animals. And then it says, among all the animals, there was not any animal suitable for Adam. That's part of the story. And by the way, the Hebrew writers, these old ancient Hebrew writers, were very earthy people. They were not like our latter-day Puritans. They were not very squeamish about being sexy. And so they knew what they were doing when they wrote these stories down and when they read them to their progeny, as the case may be. So the story goes that God created Adam. Adam named all the animals, looked at all the animals and said, nope, 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 nope. That's part of the story that's happened. We don't usually explain that part to the little children, when in Sunday school. But that's part of what's going on there. That did not escape the notice of the rabbinical scholars. After that, then God made a sleep go on Adam, and then he took a rib, whatever the heck that means. You've heard it before, not from his head to be over and not from his feet to be under him, but from his ribs to be by his side. Blah, blah, blah. That does not exhaust the story. That's just one little interpolation of it. Anyway, but then the part that I get a kick out of is then God, in the story, brought the woman to the man. So here, I'm just going to stop right there. Here's one of the realities that is being reflected in that statement. That the woman, and then when Adam, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but when Adam sees the woman, now the English translation is something like, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, right? As I understand it, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I can read what the rabbis have said. A more literal interpretation of that would be something like, yowza! Again, the rabbis not shying away from racy stories. Eve was presented. Adam, when he was created, he wasn't presented to anybody. He was created to do work. He's a workhorse. Men, when you're carrying stuff for your wife, you are fulfilling your created destiny. We were created partly, not entirely, but we were created partly to haul stuff and to build stuff and to tear stuff down. But the woman was created, here's the key point, as a presentation piece. Okay, according to the old story, according to the, again, I'm forgetting what the word is that I'm looking for. Arch something. Somebody help me out. What is the word I'm looking for? Anyway, archetype. That's it. According to the archetype in the story, the woman was created to be a presentation piece. And again, this is not requiring you to, you know, I'm not trying to bring religion. I'm trying to bring ancient wisdom. The woman was created to be presented. The man was created to work. The way this boils down, I'll use me and my wife as an example. She's not at the room, so she can't be embarrassed, but she know I say this all the time. My wife likes me best when I'm wearing a tux. Dang, I look good in a tux, she would say. Okay? My wife looks best when she's buck naked. Okay? There's the difference between the man and the woman. And you see it all the time. When you look at the Grammys and the Emmys and any place, any formal, you know, when I go, especially the more high dollar a wedding is, the more upscale the women are dressed, the more skin is showing. And that's not just because men are a bunch of sex-crazed sex maniacs. We are that. But that doesn't explain the whole thing. The fact is, it's part of our, in my opinion, part of our essential nature. The woman was created to be presented, and the man was created to work. So, you know, barring any weird, kinky things going on, men look best the more clothes they put on, right? Look at the Oscars and the Emmys and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that's showing on a man are his hands and his face. The women, on the other hand, have bare necks, bare shoulders, bare chests, bare legs, bare hips, bare midriffs, you name it. It's bare. And so when I'm doing a bride and she's supposed to be beautiful, I'm going to make sure that I have a little cleavage, right? It's not my job to underdo it, which may actually be slightly underemphasized here. It's my job to make sure she looks beautiful. And because of the way women and males and females are created, in the female, again, the female looks better the more she takes off. So without embarrassment, I'm going to make sure she's got, you know, without getting crazy, of course. I'm just going to make sure she's got adequate cleavage. It's my job. I don't want her to look at it and say, golly, he sure did a number on my boobs. You know, no, I don't want her to react that way at all. I just want her to smile and say, dang, I look hot. Okay? It's my job. And I understand it, I believe, quite well. Yep, I'm done with my list of my process here. Now it's just whatever I feel like doing, do more of it. Whatever I feel like doing, do it. Ooh, I like that. I just gave it a little shadow. You know what I've discovered? Here is a danger in doing portraits. The number one mistake that I make is I'll do a portrait and I'll make the person, especially the woman, and she looks really good in my portrait, and if she looks even better in my portrait than she does in real life, I'm gravely tempted to overlook the imperfections because of how good my portrait looks. Does that make sense? I've made that mistake more than once. You know, it looks like her, but for somehow, again, I'm not picking on, and of course Harper Ray here, this girl is lovely. You know, nothing I would do to try to improve on her, as is the case with every bride. But if I'm likely to make a mistake, that's likely to be it, is that I actually don't see my mistakes because, let's say for instance, the bride is beautiful, but she has just a tiny prominent chin, you know, not the perfect chin. It's a, well, in my drawing, I'm likely to accidentally make her chin ever so slightly smaller. Now, if I do it so slight that even she can't tell, then that's okay. But actually, what happens more often when I'm struggling with a portrait is like I can't figure out where I'm off. And the portrait that I've painted is lovely, but it doesn't look exactly like the photograph. I have learned this the hard way. And many times in those situations, I've actually idealized the face in some respect. And that's not a good thing. If the idealization is so slight that even nobody can tell, that's okay. But if it's significant enough that I don't have a perfect likeness, then that's not okay. Whew. You just never know where I'm going to go with these broadcasts, do you? Adam and Eve, cleavage. Oh boy. All right. Now, Susan's got some. Hi, Susan. Good to hear from you. Hi, Marlene. I'm glad to hear you enjoy my tips and tricks. Appreciate that. Oh, no, Uncle 57. No, my flowers are not done yet. Yeah, she looks pregnant. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's horrible. No, I have not done the flowers yet. Oh my gosh, shotgun wedding. Oh, you guys, that's hilarious. No, let's do some flowers right now, shall we? Oh boy. And there my wife is calling me, and she's the only one who can call me during a broadcast, so hang on, gang, I'll be back in a minute. Oh, I'm still laughing at you guys, the suggestion that it looks like a shotgun wedding. No, these are flowers. Let's do some flowers real quick. I haven't said anything about my glove. You old timers all know about that. I wear a glove for any medium, especially on paper where I'm sitting and drawing, and the butt of my hand is going to be sitting on the paper for any length of time. I wear a glove to protect the paper from the oils in my hands. It's funny, I had a lot of people over the years saying, is that to protect your hand? That's so funny to me. No, 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 no. The paper is not dangerous. It's there to protect the paper from the oils in my hand. By the way, the decision about whether I will do any opaque white on this painting, that will be the very last decision I make. I'm going to do everything I can up until that point. Now, just between you and me, I think it's likely that I will do some opaque. If I was doing this to show off, I would not. You know, I'd like to be able to post the painting and say, you know, 100% legitimate, you know, American Watercolor Society portrait. But that's not the purpose of this painting. The purpose is to please my client. And you know, most people outside the art world, they don't know anything about Watercolor Society. It won't matter any to them if this has a tiny bit of white on it. And on the where's my practice? Here it is. I did use white, opaque white here on her dress, and it looked very, very sweet. Now I use this white here is it was masked out, so I've already got much of that. We'll see. I don't know for sure which way I'll go, but it's likely that I will use a little bit of opaque white. And by the way, one of the tricks that I will use in case I won't do it in this broadcast. I'm just about done here today. After putting the white out, I take some clean, make sure it's clean, 320 sandpaper, and actually rub the white out so that it levels it out, and to make sure it's not at all glossy, because you want the same sheen as the watercolor. So just a little, again, using sandpaper on watercolor is an old trick. That's not a new trick at all. I'm putting a little bit of green in her flowers, even though I don't see any in the photograph, but I think it will help with the illusion that this is a bouquet. There. She doesn't look pregnant now, I hope, right? Oh, Susan, that is so funny. Shotgun wedding. Again, I'll look at this with fresh eyes tomorrow. I'm at the moment quite happy with it. And the last significant area that I need to work on is all the background. And I'm going to try really hard to more or less indicate this background, but in a very abstract manner. I'm not going to start painting blades of grass or bark on the trees or anything like that. I want it to be quite abstract. Zoom in here just a little bit while I finish these flowers. And probably call it a day at that point. So I added a little bit of ultramarine to that quinacridone red for the dark zones, and now something similar. I'm going to add a aquarelle gold ochre. And again, if I said this morning, if you have the capacity to go to the community section of my channel, and there is some challenge about that if you're on an iPad, I understand, and I tried to do it on my own iPad. I'm not sure if I succeeded yet. But anyway, the community, if you go to my channel, Dan Nelson Art, and then the fourth, there's home, videos, playlists, and the fourth word, and unless you're on an iPad, the fourth word is community, and that's where I post still images. So I posted two things there today. One was the picture of this palette. Zoom out so you can see what I'm talking about. I took a picture of this palette and labeled all the colors because this is my portrait watercolor palette. And the other thing I posted was this 1 through 15 step portrait process. All right, how about just before I go, I'm trying to decide whether to scratch out some of those flowers. I don't think the eraser will do much. It's too light. Yeah. And I honestly don't want to scratch as much as it would require. But let me do just a tiny bit, just to experiment. As soon as I find my X-Acto knife, here it is. Some of you are loving that sound. Some of you are hating it. I understand. Nah, I don't think so. I think I'll get a better look actually using opaque white on these flowers. I just about went all the way through the paper on that one, so a little bit risky. Okay, once again, pick up the lint with a piece of tape. All right, I'm going to stop there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your company and your comments. Let me back out so you can see both of those a little bit. There's my work today. Again, I'm pretty happy at the moment. I'll look at it with fresh eyes tomorrow. Not happy with this right here. See, as soon as I look, I go, oh, wait, I'm not happy with that. There you go. There. Lovely, eh? Thank you. Thanks again, Horatio, for the coffee money. We will enjoy that. And we're going to enjoy your gift to us tonight, going out to Olive Garden. Appreciate it. Thanks, y'all. Been great fun. I certainly plan to broadcast again tomorrow. Thanks. Have a good night. Bye-bye.